my pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of Oakland University's College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. I'm currently serving as a president of Oakland University's Muslim Student Association for the 2012-2013 school year. Through hard work, cooperation, and dedication, the executive board and I have been doing our best to adhere to all the needs of our members. This has been an exciting and unprecedented year as we have much planned for MSA throughout the duration of the school year. It's an honor to have been given this opportunity to host this great event, and I hope everyone will benefit from it. I would like to first thank the Islamic Association of Greater Detroit for their cooperation, and Imam Ali Layla, whom without this event, it would not be possible. Without further ado, I would like to welcome the director of Oakland University's Islamic Studies program, Dr. Malik Bala.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Sumaya. And I would like also to say I am a faculty advisor to this great association, the Muslim Studies Association, and I have enjoyed working with them. I would like to welcome you all to Oakland University, and I would like to welcome our donors who have shouldered the Islamic Studies program at OU since inception and helped making it a reality. Thank you again. I would also like to welcome and recognize the Acting Dean of College of Arts and Sciences, Dr. Tamara Jashi, and the Associate Dean, Robbie Stewart, who are in attendance here for their relentless support for the Islamic Studies program. We have been fortunate to be a stone's throw away from Islamic Association of Greater Detroit, IGAD, which also hosting Dr. Ramadan, who will be speaking there tonight. So we can follow him from here. We at the Islamic Studies program at OU are hoping to provide our student body with enough courses and knowledge that will enable them to complement the ideas of science, the ethics of business, the task of holistic healing in medicine, the insight into psychology, and above all, make them better informed and well-rounded student of life. We want them to acquire knowledge of faith, belief, and practices to equip them to look at things from a wider perspective while they work on their major academic specialty that enables them to enter into ongoing discussion about religion topics that inform fundamentals, political, historical, ethical, and cultural diversity of the society. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Paul Kubicek, Professor of Political Science and Director of Religious Studies, to introduce our honorable guest and speaker tonight, Dr. Tariq Ramadan.
It's a great pleasure for me to be here tonight, and I'd like to welcome everyone here who braved the weather to come out for this important and what I'm sure will be a very enlightening event. In particular, I'd like to extend a welcome to Oakland University for the members from the Islamic Association of Greater Detroit, and of course, our honored guest and speaker tonight, Dr. Tariq Ramadan. When Imam Ali Layla first mentioned or suggested that we bring Tariq Ramadan to campus, I was really excited about this. I'm familiar with his work, and his writings, and his face and his voice, for that matter, via video clips, appear regularly in both my Middle East and European politics courses. His scholarship and his advocacy address central core issues in international politics, and he's won wide accolades for his work and the occasional controversy in both the West and in the Muslim world. He is without question an accomplished scholar. He holds a PhD in Arabic and Islamic Studies from the University of Geneva and was trained in classical Islamic scholarship in Cairo. And he's currently professor of contemporary Islamic studies at the Oxford University Oriental Institute, St. Anthony's College, and also teaches at the Oxford Faculty of Theology. He has a numerous list of visiting and research appointments, including with the Faculty of Islamic Studies in Qatar, the University of Malaysia, Perlis. He's a senior research fellow at Doshisha University in Kyoto, Japan, and director of the Research Center of Islamic Legislation and Ethics, also in Doha, Qatar. And he's president of the European think tank, European Muslim Network, based in Brussels. And obviously my first question, if I have a question and answer, is how he has the time to do all of this. In addition, he is a prolific author. His recent books, and this is an abbreviated list, include titles such as Western Muslims and the Future of Islam, Radical Reform, Islamic Ethics and Liberation, What I Believe, The Quest for Meaning, Developing a Philosophy of Pluralism, and most recently, Islam and the Arab Awakening, which is available for sale in the foyer and will be the topic of his talk tonight. He lectures throughout the world and appears frequently in the global media. He's an impassioned advocate for social justice and interfaith and intercultural dialogue. And he was named by Time magazine in 2000 as one of the top 100 most important innovators in the 21st century. He has engaged in numerous public debates and, as noted, has engendered the occasional controversy. In the aftermath of 9/11, he was temporarily barred from the United States, but I'm pleased to note that cooler, saner, less paranoid views have now prevailed, and we're able to welcome him here on campus tonight. So without further ado, I present to you Dr. Tariq Ramadan.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me here at your university to be able to share with you some views on the Arab Awakening or the Arab Spring or the revolutions. And as you said, and I think I heard that some of the students were very instrumental, I may say, and Imam Ali Leila, who was instrumental in organizing the whole thing. So I want to thank you for that and go straight to some of the points, because it's a very difficult and complex topic which not so much time to address. So I will come to some of the points and start with an introduction and then two parts to try to analyze, or at least to, I don't know if I can say that I'm reaching some conclusions in what is happening in the Middle East. I have some questions and some views on what is happening, and as you can see now in Tunisia, in Egypt, still of course in Syria, the situation is unsettled. No one can predict what is going to happen. At least what is necessary for us is to try to understand what we knew, what happened, and the facts, and then some of the challenges that the people or the countries are facing today. So let me start with a short introduction. And recently, I was invited by Charlie Rose to discuss the book. And before the program and then within the program, his main question was, again, why do you speak and why do you talk about awakening and you avoid spring and revolutions? And from the very beginning, 2 years ago, when the whole thing started with the self-immolation of Mohammed Bouazizi in Tunisia, I avoided using the concept of revolutions and using the concept of spring. Since then, unfortunately, in a way, what is happening is confirming some of my reservation and some of my questioning about what was happening. And I can't see today a spring, and I'm not sure that in political terms we are now witnessing revolutions. I think it's much more complex than this. And my intellectual position and posture from the very beginning was to be cautiously optimistic and to try to understand what was happening. By taking this position, in fact, once again, you speak about controversies, and once again, what I heard on both sides, so to speak, coming from the West is saying, oh, once again, is a conspiracy theory. He thinks that this was not done by the people, which is not exactly what I said. On the other side, when I was dealing with some of the actors in the Muslim majority countries, in Egypt and in Tunisia, I say, oh, you don't trust the people, you think we are not able to make it, which is not exactly what I said either. To be cautiously optimistic is to be realistic and to be less emotional and to rely much more on facts. And it's, you know, I was very happy celebrating, and I'm still is. I really think that what happened and is happening now is something which is intellectually a real shift, a real awakening. Something is happening that we have to consider as not a political revolution, but I would say today an intellectual revolution. The people now, they think and they are aware that if they are willing, if they are ready, they can change the political situation in their country. And this is a great achievement in itself, to feel we can make it. But once again, to feel that you can be against and you can remove a dictator, that's fine. But the power of resistance is not enough when you are talking about a revolution. Not only you should know what you don't want, but you should prepare what you want, is to be united against, but also to be united for a project. And what is missing today in the whole process is that the strength of the mobilizations at the beginning to be united and to be against the dictator became very quickly the weakness, because it was based on against the dictator, but with no real and clear political vision. And now it's completely scattered. Now we have people struggling for power, and sometimes with no real social policy, economic policies, and no real vision as for the future. The third point that I wanted to make here, and this is where some people didn't get my point when I was talking about what was known before. And the more you study, and especially now, it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting because now it is known and said when it comes to Syria. In fact, we know today that some of the activists and the people who are resisting Bashar al-Assad, and Bashar al-Assad, once again, he's a dictator, he's a tyrant, and my position of principle is we can't support a dictator. This was before and it's still now. It doesn't mean that I am naive about the opposition and some who are behind the opposition and trying to play not always a transparent role in the way they think about the future. Not naive about that. But we have to be principled in political terms about our position, and a dictator cannot be supported and he has to leave. Now, I don't know if you read this, but this was over summer, I think you're in August, second week of August, the Time magazine published an article about the way some of the resistance, in fact, in Syria, were trained by the states on the way to deal with the social networks, internet, Facebook, and Twitter. And in fact, to help them to have a counter media approach and a counter. We know how we call them. They are called cyber dissidents and bloggers. So how to deal with the means. But this was made public by the State Department by supporting some of the institutions. And the institutions that were quoted at that time were Freedom House, Albert Einstein Institute, and a few others that are smaller, or cyberdissident.org. These are websites where the people were trained, and this is known now. It's known and it's acknowledged when it comes to Syria because there is no problem with this. The problem is that all these institutions were involved with all the training of all the bloggers before. And in fact, it started not in 2010, it started in 2003. And it started, in fact, almost at the same times where the Bush administration and George W. Bush himself said to acknowledge and to justify the intervention in Iraq. Remember? He said this is the starting point of the democratization of the Middle East. He said it in 2003, and I keep on joking about this. We didn't take him seriously because it was George W. Bush. In fact, we should have taken him seriously. Because in fact, it started in 2003, 2004, 2005, and then 2008 are critical years where people were trained. And what I'm saying here, and this is where it's very important to be very precise in what we are saying. I'm not saying that all this movement were controlled. I'm saying all this movement were pushed. Not knowing what could happen, that is clear. And now we can see that, in fact, there is one country where the European and the American administrations, they were not ready for a change for 8 months. It was Syria itself. Remember, for 8 months, the Obama administration and the European administrations were asking Bashar al-Assad, please reform your political system. And he refused. And then they changed. In fact, they didn't change all of a sudden. They changed while they were looking at the opposition and with whom they can work. Because there were in the opposition people they didn't trust. And at the forefront of these people were the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria. Because they knew quite well the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, not the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria, because it's another story. And the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria were under this very, very tough repression, and you know how much they were suppressed in 81 in Hama, where this was decided by Hafiz al-Assad, the fathers of Bashar al-Assad. So my point here is, when we come to the facts, all this business and this story, the narrative that were sold to the newspapers and to the media, all of a sudden, Muhammad Bouazizi killed himself and the whole thing started, that's not true. That's not true, and you have someone who was very instrumental. He was the link between Europe, the Middle East, and the States, in the philosophy of what we call cyber dissidence and nonviolent resistance. You might not have heard his name, is Srdja Popovic. Nothing would have happened in Serbia against Milosevic without him being very instrumental. And he came with a philosophy, 50 points, how to mobilize people is nonviolence, disciplined mobilization, and positive resistance. Very important points. And when you listen, you read this, you are quite amazed. All the positive slogans are based on what? You never talk about anything else but the dictator. You only target the dictator. You go beyond the political divisions. And you come with very strong slogans, and you remember the clinch fist? This was in Serbia, but it was everywhere. Tunisia, Egypt, Yemen, Syria, everywhere. And in fact, this is a training. It's a training that was there. And I met Srdja Popovic, and we have a live program on Dubai. And I asked him about this, and he acknowledged the fact, yes. But he told me, I don't have an ideology. My only ideology is to mobilize the people against the dictator. And he is, I might think, you know, when I was listening to him reading, I say, okay, that's fine. I can take it as someone who is mobilizing the young people to master the means to mobilization. Now, In 2008, the American embassy, and it was a woman, was the ambassador of the States in Egypt, sent a letter, and this was revealed afterward by WikiLeaks, saying in 2008 that young people are mobilizing and using the social networks to act against the dictator. And they want to throw him away by the election of 2011. This was in 2008. So we have facts here. So all this business we didn't know, that's not true. Now, why to push towards this, and why to push, in fact, against whom? Mubarak was the ally of the West, the United States and Europe, getting billions through the army and the economic support, exactly the same. Ben Ali, exactly the same. Ben Ali was very close to the French and very close to the Americans. So why at the same time pushing towards democracy and supporting the dictators? And this is where, and this is the third point of my presentation, is we were wrong in our analysis in thinking that what was happening was to be considered and assessed in political terms. What is happening in the Middle East is not for or against democracy. The real struggle is about economic power and economic stability. This is the right equation. We talk about democratization and we think, this is what Charlie Rose was telling me, say, at the end of the day, the Americans, they are supporting democracy. I say, okay, that's fine. I say, yes, democracy, this is what we want. Say, not always, because if this was the case, we would have started with the petromonarchies. But we are not talking about democracy in petromonarchies. The people who are leading the petromonarchies are saying democracy is even non-Islamic at all. And we deal with them. The question is not about democratization. The question is, which is the gain? What can we get by pushing democratic models in economic terms? And this is where I think we didn't realize or analyze enough the fact that over the last 15 years and more, in a more powerful way, over the last 10 years, the new actors and economic actors in the region were putting the American influence in danger. The first country is China. And all the countries that are known as the BRICS country, China, Russia, India, and Brazil. Add to this now Turkey, add to this South America, and add to this Malaysia. These countries today are new actors in the region. And with the old system, the old support to dictators, what was happening is the new actors were trying and getting more and more influence in the region. Remember, 2 years before he was to be killed, Gaddafi said to the French, to the British, and to the Americans, if you are not going to bring me back and deal with me, my relationship are going to be with China. And he started. 3 main contracts were signed with China. This is why you can understand afterward when NATO invaded Libya, why the Chinese and the Russians were so upset, because they lost the market by getting by getting this UN resolution, which was instrumentalized to go and to invade Libya. The same with Gamal Mubarak. Gamal Mubarak was starting, and he was very involved in the economic sector, was involved with trade and contract with China, which was problematic. Why? Because in fact, the real difference between China and the Western country is China doesn't ask about the political system. You have a dictatorship, keep it. Give us the market and keep you torture, we don't care. They don't have the rhetoric for that, but they were very powerful. And the figures are just unbelievable. In less than 8 years, the Chinese presence in economic terms multiplied by 8 over the last 7 years, by 8, which is just unbelievable, being present and challenging the American presence in the region and the European presence. And when you think about this, what is also important is to remember that not only there are economic reasons, but there are three things that are important. One of the advisors of previously of the White House, he came once and he gave a lecture. I was there and he was challenging me by saying, I don't really agree with what you say, and you should remember that the United States and the Middle East have three main concerns. The first one is oil, the second is security, and the third one is Israel. These are the three main things and the three main, elements. As to oil, we talked about it now, and this is the economic thing. As to security, security is in which way, in fact, you can control the situation not to be targeted. And what happened before was Al-Qaeda and all this. This was something that could be the global war on terror, or the global jihad, as it was called. But in fact, all this discussion about security was also dealt with in a way which was promoting a presence everywhere. And the military bases of the American military bases were everywhere. And you can see today that one of the biggest one is in Qatar, in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia. So the presence here, it's very instrumental and very powerful. And as to Israel, in economic terms, if China, India, Brazil, and the other actors were to take the lead and to transform and to shift the Middle East towards the East, it could be a very, very dangerous shift for Israel. Why? Because the Chinese, as well as the Indian, as well as the Brazilian governments, they don't have at all the same relationship with Israel as the United States of America. You remember in 2008, they invited Hamas and the leader of Hamas in China, and the first reaction of the United States is, how come you invite a terrorist? The Chinese response was, no, we deal with the elected people. He was elected, we invite him. So, meaning by this, we are going to deal with them, we are going to deal with the actors. Brazil is a supporter, remember the triangle between Brazil, Turkey, and Iran, ready to deal with Iran. Ready to deal also with India, for example, in its positioning towards Israel. They deal in economic terms, but they don't have the same positioning as the States with this unilateral support. Anything which has to do with a shift towards the East will be tremendously dangerous for the stability, or at least the international connections and the international support for Israel. So we need to take all this into account, and what I'm saying here is I don't have the key and the final answer. But anyone who is dealing with this and coming only about democratization and the people and celebrating the liberation of the people with not having all this comprehensive approach might be completely misled. Because the political discussion is not enough. And to celebrate on our side, I saw people yesterday in France, just 2 weeks before, they were supporting Ben Ali, and all of a sudden they are supporting the people. They shift with the wind as quickly as, they have to position themselves. And I say, okay, that's not right. That's not in principle position. So the political discussion is something which we have to consider. Now, this is really the backdrop and the new Middle East today. And this situation, it's important to consider. Let me give you an example. If you go on my website, I'm just publishing tomorrow. I will publish it tomorrow because I wrote it yesterday, and it's for international newspapers. But I wrote a piece on Iraq 10 years later. And I'm saying we need to study Iraq. We need to study the situation to understand what is happening in the Middle East at the same time. Because today we don't talk very much about Iraq. It was 10 years ago, and we know what happened. We were facing a lie. the Bush administration sent Colin Powell to lie in front of the world at the United Nations, saying weapon of mass, how do you say? Destruction, that there are links with Al-Qaeda. This is what he said. Hans Blix was saying that's not true. We don't have, these weapons are not there. He was not heard. All the specialists and the professionals and the experts who went there were saying we have to wait. They were not heard. It had to be done very quickly, and it was with the support of Tony Blair and the British administration and the Israeli, by the way. All the people who are telling you, or you come back to the facts and say it was only an alliance between the American and the British, and that's it, and then they push the United Nations. That is not true. We have military advisors coming from Israel, and this is what the journalist from The Independent in the UK was saying, be careful, there is a push here towards ending the dictatorship or Saddam Hussein dictatorship. So I think that here we have something which was 10 years ago a lie to explain to us we need to get rid of Saddam Hussein to go towards democratization. Wasn't it about democratization? Yes, we want a democracy there because this guy here is crazy and he's a tyrant. 10 years later, what do we have? We don't talk about it. Complete division. The political system is completely artificial, based on ethnic and religious divisions. In fact, what was pushed was more division between the Sunni and the Shia within, structuring the political system in a very fragile way, and having an elite of entrepreneurs and businessmen and politicians being protected in a security basis and dealing with the country and with no security, daily violence, and no stable political system. This is Iraq today. And day in, day out, you have people being killed. The country is very fragile and unstable, but just enough to keep it quiet at the national level. That's fine. Come to the economic side of the equation. Very good. Very good for the transnational corporation. They have direct access to the oil. Very good for the people who are building the country again because they have access and they have the contracts. In economic terms, Iraq is an El Dorado. In political terms, a catastrophe. Think about what is happening there, and then you start thinking about a second country where you have almost exactly the same situation. Very fragile political system, not really secure, lack of security and complete violence from time to time, making the situation very difficult, but the oil and all the resources are protected. Libya, exactly the same. Today the people are saying Gaddafi was killed, but still the political system is unsettled and violence is there, and you have tribes and clans killing each other. Weapons everywhere. The point is that the political system is not strong, and it's very fragile. And we were asked, and we heard that we need to buy this. The whole process is about democracies in the country. Now, what was protected from the very first day was the oil resource. And we had a French newspaper, and they put this at the front page, saying there is a deal. This was before the NATO intervention. There is a deal that after Gaddafi is going to be thrown away, 35% of the oil production coming from Libya will go straight to France, which was the leading force in this. And this was confirmed in the year after. So in the relationship between politics and economy, you end up thinking it might be that very fragile political systems are helping a new economic dependence and a new control. all what was potentially going towards the east is coming back now towards the control of the Western transnational corporation and the Bretton Woods institution. You want two other examples? Tunisia and Egypt. Tunisia and Egypt now are completely unsettled country. Completely unsettled. You have from within the Salafi and secularist versus Islamist. Add to this in Egypt the most important actor within the country that we are not talking about, but from behind the scene, they can decide tomorrow what could happen in the country is the army. Tomorrow, if the army is deciding in Egypt it's over, it will be over. No one can resist. It's so much so that you have the Muslim Brotherhood dealing with them and trying just to keep them. And we were told they removed them from the picture. No, they gave them a new role within the civil state, but they didn't remove them from the picture. They can't. And when I'm talking about the army in Egypt, I'm not talking about security and weapons. I'm talking about 60% of the economic sector. Very powerful. And the link is direct with the US administration. Direct. So the money is not coming straight to the government. It's straight. And in the new constitution in Egypt, it's just unbelievable what the way they were protected by the new constitution as to the judiciary, the role, and the fact that they are not going to be even, judged for what happened in the past, but they have a very protected status within the new constitution. This is what is happening with the army. So when you have all this in mind, and you think about the whole process of democratization, it might be that by adding the economic dimension, we get another picture that fragile political systems are open market for the old actors resisting the new type of relationship that you can have with the Eastern countries, for example, like China and Russia. And then you can understand why the Chinese and the Russian governments, they don't want to start again the same process in Syria, because this is where they were supporting the Syrian government, and this is also something which is for them the only link that they can have with the region. Why? Because one of the dimensions where it's important to keep, and it's possible to keep an influence, would be in this divide between what is going to be, and this is what I am saying and suggesting in the book, one of the main challenges of the coming years in the region is the relationship between Shia and Sunni. And the relationship between Shia and Sunni means the axis Iran, Lebanon, Syria. And this is instrumental. So by keeping Bashar al-Assad, who is supported by the Lebanese Shia and supported by Iran in a very unilateral way, you keep something that could be an unbalance and keeping the divisions within. And remember that this is once again not new. In the 80s, on the other side of the equation, Saddam Hussein was pushed by the Americans against the Iranian regime. He was supported. Rumsfeld, we have very nice pictures of Rumsfeld greeting the tyrant to come, or the dictator to come, Saddam Hussein. Very friendly, supporting him. And he presented himself, Saddam Hussein, as the Sunni resisting the potential Shia danger. This is the way he was presenting himself. And this was in the 80s. In the 80s, this was a very important thing. And in Iraq, afterward, playing on the Shia and the Sunni affiliation was also the game that was known by everyone, by the American administration, to divide the country. Now it's from Iran and Iraq to within Iraq to in the whole region. The Middle East now is in danger of these divisions. And pushing in that direction, you have the new allies, China and Russia versus the Americans, and they are playing the divisions. I'm very cynical because of this about what is happening in Syria today. more than 170 people being killed every day, more than 1 million people, refugees out, abroad, and nothing is happening. And in fact, I think that what we are witnessing now is what the US Department and the State Department is calling a low-intensity conflict. Low-intensity conflict is a conflict within borders that you know is going to happen. People are being killed, but that's okay. You can sell weapons, you can control the situation, and you can take advantage of the geostrategic situation. And I would say that today, between China and Russia on the one side, and Western administrations, the American and the European, they agree not to agree on this situation, and they leave it like this. There is much more to gain with what is happening than to try to solve the problem. And for many reasons, in geostrategic terms, in economic terms, and also because with this situation, you can see the whole region is destabilized, and it's much less problematic for the security of Israel. Paradoxically today, the situation of Israel within the region is more powerful than it was before. They didn't want Saddam Hussein, and now you have Syria completely destabilized, and no other country can do whatever. And the first question that was asked to all the people, among them the Islamists, remember, this was in Tunisia and this was in Egypt. They had to say it clearly, they will never, never question the substance of the agreement, the peace agreement between Israel and the governments. And they had to say it. So by saying we are not going to challenge this and not being secured within, they are in a very fragile situation. While you know that if we were to witness true democratic processes, they would have to deal with this because all the populations in the Middle East, in Muslim majority countries, are not happy with the policy of Israel and any kind of relationship. This is known. So in order to keep the people and to push towards something which is a more transparent or called or so-called democratic regime, you have to push, get the destabilized situation and the leaders to agree and accept the agreement. Okay, with this, and I come to my conclusion, just to give you the floor, you can get something from my sense in this discussion. First, what we knew before is very, very important to study. And I would say we have to stop to be emotional with the revolutions, and we have to be more rational with uprisings. And we have to understand who is playing which game and why. Why, at the end of the day, when I'm talking to people from the US administration, when I'm talking to Serja Popovic, when I'm talking with trainers, why were you training these people to mobilize the populations in the Muslim majority countries? Why? If you didn't want to push them to do this. Why were you doing this? Why the State Department was supporting this? Why the European administrations and the State Department and American institutions and transnational corporations were organizing a network of Middle Eastern bloggers and training them. 22nd, 23rd of September 2010 in Budapest, Google organized the first network of Middle Eastern cyber dissident. Why? Why to put this money? Let me give you another example. Why is it that Google, for example, you remember when Mubarak cut all the link to internet, it was not possible? Who gave them the satellite codes to the cyber dissidents? Google. They gave it to the people to get a link and to be able to carry on the mobilization. At the same time, while the Bush administration, the Obama administration and the European countries were asking Bashar al-Assad to reform his regime because they were still supporting him at that point, when the bloggers asked for the codes and the satellite codes, Google refused to give them to the Syrian people. Why? Why do you give them to the Egyptian at that point and not to the Syrian people? And remember, the Iranian government, just to see the links, you know, Twitter and Facebook and all these are not completely independent and far from everything. In Iran, just after the election, what the governments did after repressing the people, they cut Twitter. And Twitter stopped at the same time under the pressure. Who asked Twitter to start again? The Bush administration. And they start again. The Obama administration. I don't know why I keep on, because it might be because on this side there is no important difference, by the way. Unfortunately, I'm quite disappointed with this. I had great hope in changes. But anyway, on this, what I am saying is, when with all this, what we have to say is to understand what happened before and to try to analyze. When we talk about what is happening during and what happened, is to get a more comprehensive approach. We should not understand the Middle East only in political terms. It's wider than this. We are witnessing today a shift towards the East, and we have to understand that this is an economic struggle and a geostrategic reality. It has nothing to do with democracy per se, because I still don't think that the great power, when it comes to economic interest, they care about, you know, who is or what is a democratic country and who are the Democrats. Once again, I'm still saying and keeping on saying, let us see what is happening with the oil countries today. And then now with this, and this is my last point, when we have this whole picture still, instead of sitting and thinking that it's all coming from abroad, now something happened in the countries, and especially in Tunisia and Egypt, which is so important. And we need to ask the right questions to the people who are leading now. The dictators left. Now the countries are in a way moving towards something that no one can predict what is going to be. But once again, we can just say, oh, it's all controlled, and I think it's not. When the people take into the street and you have this movement and massive movement, it means that there is hope. The problem that we have now is, as I told you, the strength of the movement are now the weakness of the movement, because there is no vision for the future. And unfortunately, there is one problem, which is this polarization between Islamists and secularists, as if everything was in this polarization. And you see secularists saying to the Islamists, you are backward, you are fundamentalist, and we are progressive, and we are the true Democrat, you are not. On the other side, you have the Islamists saying to the secularists, you are westernized, you are the sold out to the West, and it's not progressive mind that you have, is just compromising with our values. So we are the guardian of our principles. And between the two, we have a justification, which is not a justification based on a political vision, but a justification based on the opposition to the other. So a polarization that is missing on both sides the true questions within the country. And we had people trying to do things like this. And Monsef Marzouki in Tunisia, for example, he is a secularist. But he was saying, willing it or not, the Islamists have popularity. They have people supporting them. We have to deal with them. You like it or not, they are legitimized, and we have to deal with them. And the Takat told the other movement is saying exactly the same, so to try to have an alliance. But it's very fragile. In Egypt, it's almost impossible to get this. Now you have Mohammed Morsi, who is the president, and around him you have people coming from all sides, Salafi, secularists, and the polarization is still there. And this is unfortunate. Why? Of course, we need to talk about the nature of the state. And as you can see now, Olivier Roy, the sociologist, was saying, in one of his books, we are witnessing not the Islamist revolution, but these are post-Islamist revolution. And he was saying, yes, they might lead the country and they might win the election, but the substance of their ideology has changed tremendously. They are not the same. On one point, there is something which is interesting, that since the 80s, but more importantly, over the last 10 years, all these Islamists are not talking about an Islamic State. They want to distance themselves from the Iranian experience, and they are saying we are following in the Turkish experience. And you know that the Turkish experience is interesting. Why? Because Erdogan is coming from a very Islamist background. Erbakan was his mentor, and he was an Islamist. But now he is saying, I don't have a problem with the secular system. I can play within the secular system with Islamic values, but within the secular system. And he went to Egypt saying, don't be scared of the secularist system, deal with it. And many of the young Islamists were saying, we are much more following Turkey than following Iran. Iran is not a model for us. And by the way, I don't buy this thing that Turkey in itself is a model. We still have to be critical about, minorities, transparency, and freedom over there. But the point is that we have this polarization, and we are talking about models, and now the Islamists are saying we are promoting the civil state with Islamic reference. We don't know exactly always what it means, but it went as far as for Rashid Ghannouchi to say Sharia should not be in the constitution. He acknowledged the fact that Sharia, and the discussion between Salafi and Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt is, should it be the exclusive source or one of the sources, or shall we put it or not? Because we have many trends that they don't agree on that. So the discussion is open, but beyond this polarization, we should go and tackle the other issues. And what I'm saying here is the future, and no one can predict this, but at least we need to ask the true questions and the right questions. It's not the qualification of the state, is how are they going to work against corruption? How are they going to work against, or at least to be clear on the role of the armies within the democratic system? Third, what kind of educational system are they going to promote? This is the future. If you want democracy in a society, we need to talk about the school state system and education. Where are the policies that are dealing with this? Social justice. This is also something which is important. Which type of economic system? They are all now under the exclusive authority of the Bretton Woods institution when it comes to the World Bank and the IMF, when it comes to the economic structural adjustment. All this is decided far from the country. The third discussion, and the connected discussion, is how are we dealing with the South-South relationship with other societies? Because one of the main problems that we have in the Middle East today is that we speak about spring, but there is nothing like an Arab Spring. The Egyptians are completely obsessed with Egypt, the Tunisians with Tunisia, and the Yemen with Yemen, and the Libyan with Libya. There is no connection. This is not a front. This is not a process where you understand that there will be no real liberation in the Middle East if there is no South-South relationship. You cannot make it alone. You're not going to be free alone as a country, because this is where you need this connection, a strategy in the region. This is missing today. Add to this, with the economic system, something which has to do, and I keep on repeating this because I think that we are not serious enough about this, is democratization means also cultural liberation. Is how do you celebrate your language, your culture, your heritage as something which is important. One of the main crises in the Arab world is this crisis of identity, and crisis of culture, and crisis of language, and crisis of reference. And you are not going to promote, democracy without well-being. And well-being, we need to deal with creativity and literature and arts. All these things have to do with culture, and we have to talk about this. This is a policy. This is a policy which is important, and we are not talking enough about this. So we have here 5, 6 challenges that are completely absent from the current discussion, because we are obsessed with political structure and polarization. We need to ask the right question, and we need to be involved. And the last point is you add to this challenge, as I said, the Shia-Sunni divide, which is going to be very important, and it comes back to us. I keep on repeating what is happening there. It's coming back to the West, and we see now Shia and Sunni who are not talking to one another. I myself, by being against Bashar al-Assad, I'm facing now very, very tough criticism by people saying you support the resistance because you are a Sunni, because you are acting against the Shia, and it's very difficult to make a point heard here, which is it's a position of principle. It's not a position of affiliation to the Sunni and the Shia, and this is exactly what I said, by the way, when it came to Bahrain. I reacted to some Sunni scholars when they say in Bahrain these are Shia against Sunni. No, no, no. It was people for a just system against a corrupt regime. And this is also something that we have to do on both sides and not only on one side when it comes to this. But it's very difficult because you are also, the media covering and coverage of the whole thing. It's important. Remember that Al Jazeera in Qatar was supporting the whole movement in Tunisia, in Egypt, but kept silent on anything which was happening in Bahrain. So this is also a strategy. So these are the points that I wanted to make. I hope that you got the point that I'm not in a simplistic conspiracy theory. I'm just saying it's deeper than that. I'm just adding few dimensions to the political or the reading of the political side of the equation, and then asking and trying to ask the essential questions for the future if these countries in the Middle East want really to achieve the democratic process. Thank you.
Now we would like to open the floor to any questions that any of you may have. If you have any questions, if you can walk up to the podium, that'd be greatly appreciated. Yes, and you can stand up together. Yes.
Yeah. The situation in the Arab world, it looks like Jahiliyyah when Prophet Muhammad came to change the whole picture. We can't ask for Prophet Muhammad again, so what's going to happen? I mean, I don't know who would be the hopeful person or group can change the Arab world to be on the right track again.
You're asking me who? I have no idea about who. That's my point. And very often it's the case, even when we are in the States, when we are in Muslim majority countries. Very often we are hoping for a leader to lead the people, and very often we are expecting a charismatic leader. And we have to stop. And I keep on repeating, the problem with a charismatic leader is the fact that he's charismatic, or she is. Because this is not what it's needed now. Of course, we might have, people coming with new understanding, and we can hope, and we need this. Of course, we need this. And it is said, in fact, in our tradition as Muslims, there is a tradition saying that every century we'll have someone or a group of people helping us to renew our understanding of the religion. It doesn't mean that they are going to be leaders in political terms, but at least to help us. And we have this. This is happening, in fact. But in political terms, we need now to understand that we should stop with just blaming the leaders, and we need to create leadership. I remember one Belgian sociologist, Professor Dassetto, once he was dealing with the Muslims, he said, you know what? I dealt with all these Muslims, lots of leaders, no leadership. And that's the point. The point where you have many leaders, but a vision and something. And this has to come with something which is a low process to deal with the people, to respect the people, to to listen to their concerns, and to try to come with a vision, and to ask the right questions, And I think that today, all the people who were in the streets at the beginning of the process, they are very disappointed, because it's as if what they are saying was not heard, their hopes were not achieved, and what they see is people struggling for power and not really addressing the problems. And once again, when you deal with the people, it's important to deal with respect, but also with caution, because they are very much in a hurry. And 2 years in historical terms is nothing. So we should not now assess the situation by saying it's failing, it's over. No, it's not. It's going to be very long. So how do we deal with this? It's important.
How does Islam define democracy? And what does Islam say to a Muslim, a citizen, living in a country of dictatorship?
That's always interesting when you say, what does Islam say? You have many interpretations. What I'm going to tell you now, it's not the exclusive Muslim interpretation. Because for some literalists, they would stop you by saying, wrong question. No democracy in Islam. There is no democracy in Islam, because democracy is the power of the people. In Islam, the power is coming from God. We have literalists thinking like this. Even with those who were involved in the democratic process in Egypt, just before this, they were saying, for us, democracy is not halal or haram. Democracy is kufr. It's just denying the truth. It's wrong. This is one dimension. It's a minority, but a heard voice in the Muslim world. Now, when it comes to other interpretations, and for example, from where I am in the reformist, legalist trend, which is the mainstream, in fact, I have no hesitation by saying the mainstream Islamic thought is based on this. This is what we have, with the silent, but also the visible, the silent majority of Muslims, but also the visible, active, and scholarly rooted tradition, is to say we don't have a problem with the principles, but we might have to think about our specific models. Principles are universal, or principles are transnational. Models are historical and changeable. And this is why you don't have the same democratic models in Europe between Britain, France, and Switzerland. Why? Because they have other history, other collective psychology, and even here, some of the Europeans, they don't at all understand your system. They don't get it. How come, for example, you can have a majority and at the end you are not elected because you have great electorate? You have a strange system, and this system is coming from your history. And if you go to Switzerland, my country, it's even more complex with 26 cantons. It's coming from history. Now the models are changing. From an Islamic perspective, if you think about the 6 main principles that Touraine, for example, was setting, and coming back to what was the beginning of the whole discussion about the democratic systems with Locke, the philosopher, but mainly what we have now, it's rule of law, equal citizenship, universal suffrage, accountability, separation of power, and separation of authority. With these principles, we don't have a problem. So, for one interpretation, the mainstream interpretation of Islam, not all the Muslims would say that. So, now how we call it, until the 80s, many scholars were reluctant to use democracy by saying, no, we have shura, amruhum shura baynahum. And then they changed. The one who was the first to say, I don't have a problem with the concept of democracy, is Rashid Ghannouchi. But Muhammad Abdu, and this also the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, Hassan al-Banna, he followed him on this by saying, we don't have a problem with the British parliamentary system. The model of this parliamentary system can suit us because it's not against our principles. Look at this. This was the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, where they were saying, we don't have a problem with this. So they were not confusing the model with the principles. So in this, the principles could be completely acknowledged. And in the book, Western Muslims and the Future of Islam, or Islam, the West and the Challenges of Modernity, I'm tackling this by showing we don't have a problem with the principles. Now, we need to find a model. We don't have an Islamic model. And if someone is telling you, yes, we have an Islamic model and an Islamic state, you say, what do you mean by an Islamic state? What do you mean? A state with Islamic principles? So let us try to understand what we mean by this. Because it cannot be a theocracy. But is it the way Iran is dealing with the Velayat Faqih, or someone who is beyond the rule of law, or the guardian of the reference or not? In the Sunni tradition, we don't have that. We shouldn't have that. Even Ahl al-Hal wal-Aqd, who are instrumental in the legal procedure, they are not beyond the law. So we have to think about all these dimensions. So my response to this is not to tell you what Islam is saying, but what the mainstream Muslim position could be.
What about the second part?
Once again, you have exactly the same position. You have people saying, أطيعوا الله والرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. You have to obey God and the messenger and the people who have authority. So when you have an authority, if they are Muslims, even if they are dictators, keep quiet and follow. Because they are not here by chance or by accident. The great majority would say no. Would say no. When you have a tyrant, you should resist. This is legitimate resistance. أفضل الجهاد كلمة حق أمام سلطان جائر. The best jihad is a word of truth in front of a tyrant. So you say the truth and you resist. And this is the very meaning of jihad. Jihad is resist what is bad and to reform for what is good. So it's not to kill innocent people, it's to resist the tyrant and to resist oppression. So we have a long theory of coming from the Islamic sources saying when your resistance is legitimate. But a tiny minority would say we don't, because the authority is where it should be by the will of God. And this is even problematic in our understanding.
Democracy definition is enforcement of will of majority on unwilling minority. How do you justify it in Islamic and non-Islamic system?
I don't got the, how do I justify what?
Enforcement of will of majority on unwilling minority. That's democracy.
Yes.
How do you justify it in Islamic and non-Islamic system?
This is a non-Islamic system?
Yeah, Western, you know.
No, but what is a non-Islamic system? The fact that
Democracy, definition of democracy is enforcement of will of majority on unwilling minority.
Right.
So how do you justify it in any system?
In any, so it might be Islamic then.
Okay, let's forget about Islam in any system.
Because you have to take decision and you rely on people. When it is said in the Quran, for example, and this is coming from the Islamic tradition, أمرهم شورى بينهم أو شاورهم في الأمر, it is said to the messenger is you have to listen to them and to listen to what they have to say, and then you take a decision. By definition, a human decision in a community or in a collective way will rely on the majority versus the minority. By definition, you cannot take a decision. And the best example is with the messenger himself. When he was before Ghazwat Uhud, his position, he himself, he wanted to stay within the town and not to go outside. But some young and not so young companions, they wanted to go out, and they had a deliberation, and he lost. The majority was we go out, and he was in the minority saying we stay within, and he followed the majority. He followed the majority because this is when you enter into the discussion and the rule of the game are clear, we will take together a decision based on majority. So when at the end you are unwilling, you are quite unfair with the rule you accepted before entering. We have some Democrats that are like this. They enter into a council and as long as they are winning, they are okay. And when they lose, they go outside and say, oh no, that's not my decision. I say, okay, that's not right. The right is you accept the rule of the game, and this is why it's important. Remember I was very strong with the Islamic Front of Salvation in Algeria. They wanted to enter into the election, and they were saying, first, democratia is not in the Quran. So democracy is not in the Quran. We are going to play the game, and then when we win, we change the rule. And they were saying it. We change the rule. So we come to take over, and then when we have power, we change the whole thing. You can't say this. If you use the rule to reach power, you should respect the rule afterward. And this is what is important also in the prophetic tradition, that he himself was driven in worldly affair. In worldly affair, he was driven by a majority process. And I can't say and see any other way to deal with it. Of course, you have to have rules that are, rule of law is really much what is protecting the whole process. But to say that this is un-Islamic, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say it's un-Islamic. I would say this is the very essence of Shura. Yes?
Dr. Ramadan, thank you for the talk. And I'm wondering, would you share your thoughts about the ongoing discourse in the region? Now we see this violation of sacred spaces, and yet at the same time, such heated intensity on the side of the Islamists. So do you feel the ongoing discourse is going to maybe lead to a revitalization of the Islamic tradition, a revitalization of the intellectual process, or is it muddying the sphere? And my other concern—
I don't get which kind of discourse. What are you talking about?
When we take a look at, say, for instance, fellow Salafis or the Muslim Brotherhood and the monopoly over the religious discourse, and yet at the same time we see people who are calling themselves secularists and saying, well, this is not the true tradition of Islam, and there is a contestation over the monopoly of this tradition. So is it leading the Islamic community further away from an opportunity to revitalize the tradition, to bring back this dynamic of the spirit of questioning, of openness, or is it muddying that sphere? And I'm also wondering if you could speak about the position of Al-Azhar in all of that, and what do you imagine would be its role in the future to come?
Okay. I really think that if you listen to the voices and you listen to the young people in Egypt, for example, or in Tunisia, the least I can say is that we are facing a very deep crisis as to the religious reference. Because it's everywhere, but at the same time, the fact that this discourse now is the discourse of the people who are in power. And at the same time, you have another discourse coming from people who are contesting this power in the name of the Salafi rhetoric. And the secularists are criticizing both and saying at the same time that they are connected. I think that many people are losing trust as to the official political religious discourse. They are losing trust. And add to this, there is a great deal of disappointment. So there is a double crisis, that the credibility that they had as an opposition is lost as people who are running the country. And, in the book Radical Reform, I was talking about this. I was talking about the fact that the power of counterpower in ethical terms can, protect your ethical credibility. But when you are in power, it's another business. So what we see now, it's something which is very, very confusing as to the religious reference. What is going to happen? I could say now, for the time being and for the coming years, anything could happen. What could happen is more and more people being disappointed and taking a distance from the religious reference. What could also happen, and this is my hope, is that this will push the people intellectuals, activists, to come with a renewed understanding of what we are talking when we are talking about the Islamic references. So it might be a crisis that is announcing, precursor to a new revival of the Islamic thinking, which is needed now. It's needed because we can see now that we are reaching the limits of something in political terms and social terms. Because it was easy when you are repressed and then we are in opposition, it's easy to say we have an alternative. Islam is the solution. That's fine. But now you are in power and you are not powerful in economic terms. You have a kind of authority without power and a kind of power without authority. So you can lose everything as to the rhetoric of the past. This has to be reassessed. Now Al-Azhar as an institution, it's once again now trying to find, because it was under the authority of the dictator. Now to try to find an independent voice and to be able to be heard and credible in the whole process, we need time for that. But there will be no way for Al-Azhar to be heard and to regain the status as a rooted institution and an institution that is addressing the contemporary challenges if there is not an internal reform to the institution, which is needed. It's not new, by the way. Muhammad Abdu was saying this at the beginning of the 20th century, saying we have to remove the dust from what we are teaching. I think that Al-Azhar is once again, a great, great, great institution. But we need a very profound reform from within for this institution to be independent, religiously speaking, intellectually speaking, and to get something which is a broader knowledge of the world, a broader knowledge of I think that there is a misunderstanding here. You are not faithful to tradition when you isolate knowledge from what is happening around you. It's just that we are not faithful to the deep tradition of Islam because we keep the tradition, we keep the roots, we keep the legacy, and we don't address the contemporary issues in a way. No, a strong institution is rooted in the past, open as to the future. I'm teaching at Oxford University. And I can tell you sometimes I'm just looking at this institution and say, wow, every time in everything it's very much rooted in a very long tradition, scholarly tradition. But when I come there and I'm dealing with students and professors, it's clear that we are addressing the contemporary challenges. So never forget the roots and see the world. Look at the world with an open mind, a critical thinking. I think that this is to be faithful to tradition, is not to be narrow-minded as to our tradition. Thank you. Just wanted to.
Thank you for all who participated in the question and answer session. While our event may be coming to a close, the search for knowledge is never ending. I encourage that everyone here in attendance to take what we have learned today and not only apply it in our daily lives, but to use it as motivation to further our understanding of the world. I would like to thank everyone who attended today's program. Thank you.